everyone, welcome to another What I Would Have Done Thursday. And today, since we are in the month of love, I thought it would be interesting to briefly discuss a romantic comedy that does not give me butterflies inside, even though that is sort of contradictory considering the fact that I am wearing butterflies. But regardless, it gives me sort of a pain and probably some form of diarrhea because it is just one of those very kind of lowbrow, low quality romantic comedies. As you can see by the title, I'm going to be discussing The Ugly Truth. Yes, The Ugly Truth, that stars Katherine Heigl and Gerard Butler. Yes, this one came out I think when I was in high school. Probably, I wouldn't say it is approaching 10 years, but at the same time, it's almost there. I'd say probably mid 2000s later, or probably more later 2000s. But still, despite its age, I think it still maintains this level of low quality, but at the same time, I think it's showcased a lot on various channels that play movies and make movies sort of the center part of the TV channel. So yeah, without further ado though, let me discuss what I would have done with The Ugly Truth to make it better, because I feel that every form of criticism deserves some kind of idea as to how to improve upon that criticism. So without further ado, let me discuss the things that I felt were wrong and how I would fix them. The first thing that is really right out of the gate wrong with this film is sort of the exaggeration of stereotypes. I don't think necessarily stereotypes are bad. I'm not this PC correct kind of girl who thinks that everything should be laid out in a politically correct manner, because I don't believe PC-ness holds a whole lot of truth, and I think it tries to shroud things and make the world seem perfect when really it isn't. And people do have flaws, and people do have certain traits within them, and even though if those traits may be stereotypical, I don't think that we should bash people for having those kinds of traits or exhibiting certain behaviors. Just as long as they exhibit certain behaviors that aren't really offensive or degrading, then we're I think okay. The problem with The Ugly Truth is that it exaggerates the gender stereotypes. See, there's a difference between showcasing stereotypes and exaggerating them. There is a way to showcase gender differences, and there is a way to showcase different ways in which genders relate to one another. But with The Ugly Truth, it's so overblown, exaggerated, that you don't feel like that they're taking their characters all too seriously. Perfect example is our two main leads. Now, the two main leads of this film, Katherine Heigl and Gerard Butler, basically play a couple that ultimately gets together, but they hate each other. And eventually Gerard Butler has to become the love expert for Katherine Heigl's character, which is probably some of the most typical cliche things that you see in a romantic comedy. See, the thing about these characters is that when they have these stereotypical traits that I think are real and there is some merit to them, they display them in the most overblown, overinflated, over-exaggerated way that they don't feel like actual characters anymore. They just feel like cutouts of what men and women are, as opposed to seeing the characters as full-rounded human beings. For example, Katherine Heigl's, you know, kind of pickiness and her her annoyance factor, as well as her uptightness, it is a characteristic that some women display. But the way that they display it with her character is so over exaggerated. Like, it's not like every now and again she kind of becomes a little uptight, or now and again she becomes a little bit annoying, or now and again she kind of maybe nags or gets overly emotional um, uh, for for maybe ridiculous reasons. But it's not to the point where it's happening pretty much in every single scene. And that's the problem with her character. She's not she doesn't exhibit anything beyond the kind of stereotype, which is in stark contrast to someone like Sally. When Harry met Sally, Sally is a little bit uptight. She is a little bit uptight. She does get a little bit annoying at times. She does get a little bit over emotional. But it's not so exaggerated. It's not so it's not this wave of uptightness. It's not this wave of annoyance. It gels itself a little. So we do feel like that this is an actual character, this is an actual human being, this is an actual representation of female characteristics. So again, I think that's a very important distinction to make. It's not stereotypes themselves that are bad, it's how you use the stereotypes. And in Katherine Heigl's character clearly displays too much of the stereotype, and it doesn't come off as a genuine character. Now let's talk about Gerard Butler's character and how he sort of resembles his stereotype. Now, the way Gerard Butler is represented in this film, and he plays a guy named Mike, he's very, how do you say, he's very, he has like a lot of, there's just a lot of crudeness within him. The kind of, and again, he has that, that tendency, and again, for the, this is kind of the male stereotype that, he's constantly around women and, constantly, going for like the base urges that stereotypically men have. But again, it's completely over exaggerated. It is completely shoved into our faces in every single scene of the film. Whereas someone like Billy Crystal's character, Harry, yeah, he does have those male tendencies. He does have those base urges. And that's clearly displayed within the film, but he doesn't over exaggerate or over emphasize those traits. They're there, but they're subtle. They're not over and out bombardment in your face. And that was a huge problem, I think, that this film had. It needed to tone down the stereotypical traits of the genders. It needed to tone it significantly down. And it really needed to in doing so, make the characters more rounded, give them a little bit more depth than just displaying the stereotype full on screen. So yeah, that's something that I think definitely could have been improved upon. Now this film has the cliche that I despise, and that's when again, like I've mentioned before within the plot, Gerard Butler and Katherine Heigl hate each other in the beginning. Oh, that doesn't mean they're gonna fall in love, is it? Oh, you're just full of surprises, movie. They definitely needed to tone down the hatred department of these two, because it is annoying. Like, when these two are talking to each other, I don't feel like that there's a genuine chemistry or a genuine connection. I just feel like that these characters are, you know, they're just kind of the run of the mill, you know, almost I'd say dysfunctional couple. Because just the way they and how they hate each other in this film, to me, is just way too over exaggerated, and it doesn't display anything that would create eventually a romantic relationship later on. They definitely did not use this cliche well. Like, a lot of films don't use this cliche well, and I think it's a cliche that needs to burn. But yeah, that whole hatred thing I thought was stupid, and they should have gotten rid of it. Maybe they could have had a little bit bouncing back and forth. Same with When Harry Met Sally. Tone it down. You don't need to over exaggerate and over dramatize something that doesn't need to be over dramatized. All you need to do is just show them, not particularly caring for each other, but at the same time showing some amount of tolerance for one another. Instead of, I am so going to get him, and he will see my wrath, So yeah, that just doesn't work to the movie's advantage. So that definitely needed to be toned down to the point of where we don't say that this couple hates each other, but at the same time they're sort of on the fence with one another. And this is what I thought would actually be an interesting cliche. An interesting switcheroo from the cliche, actually. Because within this film, like I mentioned within the plot, Gerard Butler ends up becoming Katherine Heigl's character's love expert. And as a love expert, he's supposed to help her get this dude that she's trying to pursue. Now, usually when you have this kind of setup, or at least a similar kind of setup, what ultimately ends up happening is that the love expert and the person that he's trying to, or she, usually it's the he who's the expert, who tries to help the person get the other person that the other person is pursuing. What happens is the love expert and the person end up falling for each other, as opposed to the other person going for the person they were initially pursuing. I think this is stupid because it is so predictable, and we have seen this time and time again. And I think it would be unique, and I think it would be interesting if this wasn't the case this time. If instead they had Gerard Butler, play this kind of, he can be sleazy. I mean, you can play that up a little, but you don't need to over-exaggerate. They make him very over-exaggeratedly sleazy, which turns into that stereotype that I mentioned. Or that over-exaggeration of the stereotype. And ultimately, I think that it would have made more sense for Katherine Heigl to be with somebody else anyway, because the way Gerard Butler is, I mean, can he honestly, does he look like even a faithful man to you, ladies? I mean, he has unfaithful spelled pretty much all over him. I mean, there's just no way that this guy's relationship material. I mean, so I think that would have actually worked out pretty well. And this is probably where you could get away with a little bit of raunchiness, but not as over-exaggerated as it is within this film, which is another point that I will get to later. But yeah, I think definitely having Katherine Heigl find another love interest and making sort of the journey getting there in sort of a comedic, funny, little quirky way would have suited this film a lot better than her ending up with Gerard Butler, because Gerard Butler in this film is a sleaze, and he does not seem like in any way, shape, or form marriage material. So yeah, that definitely needed to be altered. So again, what I also think is annoying about this film is that it tries to pin the genders against each other, which is also something that I do hate, by the way, in romantic comedies, and what I hate about, this whole gender war thing that people bring up, because I think it's stupid. Um, but basically what these films and what people like to exaggerate in the media is, oh, there's a war among the genders. The genders are trying to control one another, and woo, when really it's the people themselves that need to look in the mirror and try to improve themselves and stop complaining about somebody else making their problems even more unbearable. That's just the way I see things. But what I don't like about this film is that it takes sides. It says, yes, this one gender is right. Yes, this one gender has the high ground when it comes to this issue. Yes, that one gender is right in how the way things are. Yes, that one person is Jesus, and apparently Gerard Butler sort of plays the very flawed Jesus. I mean the unflawed Jesus, in the sense that the movie constantly takes his side. And so let's just call him Sleazy Jesus. He's Sleazy Jesus because everybody, believes in the BS that he says, because he does say a lot of that, and he has actually a TV show where he says all of that within the film. So you will understand that once you watch it. But the film does constantly take his side. It constantly takes his position. And I think, providing a sense of the flaws within the genders is a good thing. I think it's good to bring out that women have flaws and that men have flaws. There's pros and cons with both genders. That's just the way it is. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that in any way. So, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't provide a balance with the flaws and the virtues. And in doing so, it ultimately sides with one gender and with one set of rules. And there's no sense of consequences for when one gender does something wrong. It almost seems like that none of, and this goes for both the characters and both the genders, they don't seem to improve upon themselves. They don't seem to better themselves. That none of that. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that was a huge problem within this film, and definitely could have been improved upon had they balanced and evened things out. It doesn't mean that you have to be equal, and I think, again, taking maybe certain sides in certain circumstances, maybe the man sometimes is right when it comes to this situation. Maybe the woman is right maybe when it comes to certain situations. But again, it doesn't really even or gel these things out all that well. So that definitely needed to be changed and evened out a little bit more so that we could, get a sense of both sides, and at the same time not making it a war. I think had they made this sort of more on the When Harry Met Sally approach, where they just see the genders as different and try to see things through their point of view, and doing it in sort of a funny yet jabbing sort of way, we would have gotten a lot stronger product. There also, I think, needed to be less of the innuendo humor and less of the gags. It just becomes very awkward, and not a whole lot of it is really all that funny. And usually, some comedic situations that ultimately end up happening within the film could have been avoided, which you will sort of see if you choose to watch the film. And that involves panties, so yeah, I don't really want to go any further than that. But they just needed to be toned down because they are throughout the film. They are just out there in the open, no subtlety, again, which is, I think, a huge problem with this film. So, yeah, that needed to be toned down a bit. Especially when you're trying to make a film that's sort of supposed to talk about these kinds of gender dynamics. I just thought it just made the whole movie even more awkward to watch. Also, had they changed the plot scenario of Katherine Heigl getting together with the actual person that she was ultimately pursuing, then we wouldn't have a misunderstanding. Because usually what ends up happening when they have a love expert inserted in there is that ultimately when he ends up falling for her, there is some misinterpretation that brings them further apart. That, I think, could have been completely avoided had they made, Gerard Butler's character not invested in Katherine Heigl romantically, and had he, set everything up for her so ultimately things would work out. She improves herself, Gerard Butler improves himself, the other dude who is inserted into the plot that is her love interest improves himself, and then everybody walks away happy. So, yeah, that would have been my choice. Definitely decrease the drama, decrease the stupid misinterpretations. They don't need to be in there. And that definitely could have been done had they not, had they changed the plot to the way that I discussed. So, yeah, I think those are ultimately all the things that I have when it comes to this list of things that I would change in particular about The Ugly Truth. It is just one of those films where there are a lot of problems. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of things that people can find offensive about it. I personally don't take huge offense to these things because I know it's just a film and I know that what I'm seeing is not really reality anyway. But I think sometimes people take these things a little bit too personally. Like, personally, I thought in Film Brain's review when he discussed the film, I thought he took things a little bit way too seriously for what the film was. But at the same time, I do understand that there are a lot of flaws. There are a lot of issues. There's a lot of stupid stuff that ends up happening in this movie. I've ranted. I put this as one of the worst films that Film Brain's ever reviewed. But at the same time, I'm not going to bed thinking how horrible The Ugly Truth was. I mean, I sleep well at night, because I know that it's just a film. I know it's just Hollywood, and if people want to keep going and seeing these films, that's their choice. And it's my choice not to go see them. So that's just kind of the way I envision these things. I don't take it too personally. I don't get mad if they show typical female traits. I don't really get too mad at it. It's not something that I go to bed at night and get mad about. Oh, how The Ugly Truth offends this and this gender, and oh, how The Ugly Truth says this and this stuff about the genders. I mean, I just think that those things can get way over exaggerated. Clearly, this film didn't do a good job of showcasing gender politics, but at the same time, I don't take it so seriously. I don't. I mean, I think just sometimes it might hurt my brain because of just how stupid it is. But at the same time, again, I sleep well at night. I don't let these things bother me all too much. I don't get so widely offended over it. Because I like seeing things on more of the positive end. I like taking something that's horrible and trying to make something good out of it. It's like if life gives you this horrible thing, try to make it into something better. And that's usually what I like doing with films, and what I like doing with critiquing films. So I like to talk about things that I would have done to make it better. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about this film, yeah, I think I was a little bit more mad before when I reviewed it in the Film Brain review where I talked about how it was one of the worst films, only because I just thought it was stupid. Not so much anything about, like, the genders or any of that, just the fact that it was just so stupid and dumb uh, made me angry. But at the same time, when it comes to the other things like, the gender politics or the gags or the the dumb one-liners, don't get mad over it. I don't care. I really don't care. I just think it's just the way it executed itself was just so stupid is the only thing that, made me feel like I was losing brain cells. But ultimately, though, I think that's, again, all I can really say when it comes to discussing this film. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. And I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.